Hey guys, I'm Janet on occasion, and today we're talking about patch notes. That's right, there's a patch. Well, sort of. It's a beta. It's a beta. You can opt into it if you want. But it's not live. It's not a live patch. It's a beta patch, which means it will be live eventually. Which is nice, because this isn't tied to, you know, a content release, which is awesome. This is what everyone's been clamoring about. So it's definitely worth talking about. I'm not going to talk about all of it, because there's a load of campaign stuff that I'm not that interested in, frankly. It's pretty cool, though. It's pretty cool. There seem to be some nice changes, like bug fixes and things. So certainly if you guys have been having some crashes, then they might have resolved that. So yeah, check out the article if you want to. And then opt into the beta. But yeah, we're going to talk about the balance changes for multiplayer, because of course they're going to be live at some point, and they're going to be relevant for, you know, most of what I do on my channel, which is of course multiplayer. So it's called the Festag update, which Festag is, well, it's Festival Day. Or holiday, so you know, it's the Christmas update, but Warhammer, which is fun. So yeah, anyway, let's get to it. So first off, cool picture. I mean, you've gotta have the cool picture, right? It's a cool picture. But no, what we're really interested in is this. That's right, unit balancing. Lovely. Oh, also there's been some miscellaneous changes. Might as well do that actually. This is for everybody. Actually, not quite. Well, that is. If you use DirectX 12, it's good. Everything else is still campaigny. But still, if you use DirectX 12, better memory allocation. Yeah. I don't really know what that means, but maybe you'll get more frames. I don't know. So, unit balancing. Start with Bretonia. Top of the list. So the Green Knight. So hit reactions ignore chance from 0 to 50. Knock interrupts from 0 to 50. So basically what that means is, you know when someone gets hit, they go, oh, I've been hit, rather than actually fighting the guy anymore? Yeah, he's going to do that less. Which is great, because the Green Knight can get bogged down by just cheap stuff and get dragged down eventually, because he spends too much of his time flailing around, being hit. So at this point, yeah, from 0 to 50, so I'm pretty sure that's a percentage. So this means half the time he's just going to ignore that stuff. And he's just going to go ahead and start fighting things, which is really nice. So I like that. I'm a big fan of that. But also, he gets some extra AP melee damage and base melee damage, so he's going to hit harder, which is good, because especially in multiplayer, he's, what, like 2,500 or something? It's crazy. He's very expensive, so you don't really want him to get just bogged down and knocked around and spend most of his time flailing his arms about. You want him to be able to do something, and you want him to be able to do something better, so great. Nice little buffs there. He might be relevant, which is good. I want to see more units become relevant, and that is one that might be the case. Definitely want to try him out. Also, Pegasus Knights, they have better mass, which I think is good. It means they're going to be able to... I mean, they still have that problem. It's not as bad as it used to be, but they still have that problem where they land on something. A lot of them will fly really far afield and end up in some other unit. And when you try and get them out of the fight, that one guy will be stuck amongst some spearmen, and your unit will keep just being dragged back towards it. That sucks. But some extra mass, it means they'll be able to actually get out of those, you know, sort of just less massive units, and they'll be able to escape. So it's great. I like that. I'm a big fan of that. So, Knights Errant, plus 4 charge bonus. Pretty small tweak, but it is nice. I do like to use Knights Errant to keep cycle charging things, so that will benefit me for sure. And that applies to the Defence of the Fleur-de-Lis, which of course the Regiment of Renown. Grail Reliquary, the icon of Devotion ability effect range changed from 40 to 55 meters. So that's nice. So his buff, I'm pretty sure this is the one that makes people immune to psychology, I think. Pretty sure that's the one. So nice bigger range, because the range was a little bit small. You know, that aura from the Reliquary was pretty tiny. Most armies, if you wanted to make sure you had good coverage, you know, if you had a lot of peasants, you'd need like 3 of them to properly cover your army. You'd end up with a load still getting terrified that weren't in range. So I like the extra range. I think that's very worthwhile, for sure. So Dark Elves, only the one change. The Charybdis is now aquatic, which makes sense. It's a Charybdis. It's a sea monster. It should be aquatic. So that's a nice change, you know, lore-friendly. Hopefully make the Charybdis a little bit better, because without the regeneration of the Hydra, the Charybdis does tend to get focused down pretty quickly. So, you know, a little sort of niche buff is always appreciated. So Dwarfs, the Thane, now has access to the Master Rune of Slowness in multiplayer. Not to be confused with what I call the Master Rune of Sloth and Ruin, which is actually the Master Rune of Wrath and Ruin, which does slow things down. No, this is just a general slowing effect. The Master Engineer no longer has that. So the Thane will have that. There is actually a change to this rune, which we'll get into in a second. So it's lower down for some reason. So the Empire. Mortars, 50% cost decrease. I really like that, because mortars, it's very rare you're going to bother bringing a mortar when you could just bring a cannon, you know. You don't really need that arc a lot of the time, and it doesn't really do enough damage to sort of be worthwhile. It's pretty niche. So being a bit cheaper, I think, is nice. Hopefully we'll see a lot more of these, because they're an interesting unit. Flagellants, increased strength of the penitent abilities, physical resistance effect from 12 to 15. So basically a little bit more physical resistance for flagellants. I think that's good. Another nice change, because they're rarely worth the cost, just because they are so flimsy. They die very quickly. They have very low melee defense, and no missile resistance or armor. They just die very quickly to pretty much any source. Sure, you know, they'll fight to the last man, which is good, but they usually just die too quickly for them to be a significant roadblock, certainly for their price. So, greenskins, Crimson Killers, plus 20 men on Ultra, only on Ultra, so this won't apply to multiplayer. Well, it will in custom battles, but not in, you know, quick battles, because Ultra sizes are not used in that. But they're more expensive, have less armor, less health, less charge bonus, less AP, attack slower. That's all huge debuffs. All huge. They already suck. They're already a prime target. You just wipe them out first, and you don't have to worry about them. They're really easy just to focus down first. You know, if they get into melee, yeah, they'll kill, you know, thousands, but they never do. They're always just too good to shoot at, so make them even more expensive. I don't think we're ever going to see them. I can't remember the last time I saw them anyway, but now even more expensive is awful. But this is what's interesting. Tweaks to splash attack characteristics. Does that mean that they've been tweaked for the better or the worse? Do they hit more things with their splash attacks? I don't know. This could be a buff, and this could be there to, you know, stop that buff from being too big. But I don't know. It's not clear. It's really not clear, so I'm not sure. But I still think they're going to suffer the same problem, that they're just going to get gunned down before they can really do anything. So that's a pity. But Azag can now equip the Spider Banner in multiplayer. I believe the Spider Banner imbues poison attacks, I believe. I think that's the case. I'm pretty sure. I've got a feeling it is. But anyway, that's nice. That'll make him a nice extra sort of support, you know, sort of lord, basically, giving poison to nearby things. I think that'd be really cool. So I like that. Also, High Elves, Alistair the White Lion, Dragon Mounts, you've got Siege Attacker, obviously not applicable in multiplayer. He's not in multiplayer. So, yeah, a lot of this stuff is mixed up. So, you know, I'll try and make it clear. So, Bastildon with Solar Engine, more accuracy, which I think is great, because, I mean, Bastildon seemed fairly accurate anyway. To be honest, I'm not sure if it really needed it, but I like the unit, and I never feel like it's overpowered, you know. Its projectiles don't do a, you know, devastating amount of damage, but they'll do damage over time. So there's a bit of extra accuracy is kind of nice, so I like that. Norska, they've had a few little tweaks. So Ice Wolf's chariots can now run at 95 speed, which is super quick. That is super quick for chariots. I'm not sure what that speed was before. I think it was something like 87, if I'm remembering correctly. So nice little speed buff. Marauder champions have extra health, which I think is worthwhile, because they're supposed to be elite units, you know, but they did, again, they did seem to get whittled down a bit too quickly by anything sort of armor piercing. So it was a bit of a pity. They could often just get wiped out before they could get much work done, which is a shame because they're very stocky defensive units. So now this helps to enforce that a bit more, I think. Also, the great weapons, they're actually a little bit quicker, which is interesting. I don't know if that makes them as fast as the normal champions. Maybe they're a bit slow before, or what. I'm not entirely sure, but they're a little bit quicker. So that's good. Kaihar the Tormentor. See, I haven't played a Norska campaign in a long time, but I think that might be one of the special units you get if you, you know, become best buds with one of the Chaos Gods. But anyway, that, again, not applicable to multiplayer. Famir and Balefiends both get Siege Attacker as well. It's weird they didn't have that, because every similar unit does. So I'm not sure if that was a mistake, or they just thought, oh, actually, we should give it to them. I don't know. But so that's interesting. If you do any siege battles in multiplayer, fine, but obviously quick battles, no. Skaven, Plague Monk Censer Bearers, +1 melee attack. Censer Bearers, I think, kind of suck. They have the same problem that Crimson Killers get. They're just great targets. Same problem as Flagellants, really. They'll just get focused down, and they can get killed by basically any source. So, at least if they do get into combat, they can get more killing done, you know, before they're all killed, which is quick. So, sure, tiny buff. I'd like to see some more missile resist or something on them, but I like that. It helps a bit, I suppose. Here, Tomb Kings. The Tomb Scorpion. Hit reactions, ignore chance, and knock interrupts are both up. So, just like the Green Knight, he's going to be ignoring more of his hits, which means he's actually going to be better there, which is interesting. But his mass has been lowered, so he won't be able to get out of a fight as easily, and his melee defense has been lowered by 2. So, I mean, they don't have the best melee defense anyway, so that's going to mean they're going to die a lot quicker, but they're going to fight things that might knock them around a lot more now, which is interesting. interesting. Also siege attacker for them, which again makes sense. They're a big, I mean, they're basically a battering ram, aren't they? They're a giant stone scorpion. It's odd they didn't have that, but yeah. So this is interesting. I'm not sure how this is going to work out, whether it's going to be a buff or a debuff, or if it's going to completely depend on what they're attacking. So interesting to know. We'll have to see how that works out. Very strange. It's not a clear one. How much better or worse this will make them. So, Vampire Coast, deck droppers, all of them are slower and have reduced turn speed. That is brilliant, because they are super overpowered, especially the handguns. Because what tends to happen is you have your deck droppers run towards something. It could even be archers. You have to run towards them, get a volley off, the arrows start flying, you take a couple steps back, all the arrows miss, and then you take a couple steps forward and shoot again. So the reduced turn speed, it means they won't be able to keep, spinning like that and keep avoiding things quite so well. So it's maybe a bit slower. It means that they can be countered by more sources. Before it was only really handguns and cannons or other flying units they could really do much with them, but not a lot of armies have access to all those things. Most armies just have a load of archers and, or crossbowmen or something, and you can't hit them with that. They'll just move out of the way. So I think that's good. It means they're not going to be invincible so long as you keep microing them. So that's good. Also, slightly less ammo, slightly reduced accuracy, less AP damage, and standard projectile damage. So huge debuffs across the board, but they were an instant pick, I think. Deck droppers were just too useful. So that's great to see that they've been lowered. The bombers, though, including the Regiment Renown, they have a bit more ammunition, which I think is good, because their damage was really low. They usually ran out of ammo before they could pay for themselves. It didn't matter what they were attacking. They're sort of better at fighting low-armoured stuff, and then low-armoured stuff tends to be cheaper. So it was rare they'd pay for themselves. It's rare they'd get that value before they ran out of ammunition, so that's a nice change. And it also means that people might bring more of the bombers instead of the handguns, rather than just seeing handguns every time. So that's nice. So, gunnery mobs, bombers, extra charge bonus, ammo, melee attack, and more men on Ultra. I don't know if that's just remedying a bug or not there, but yeah, they're just going to be better fighters, which I think is good, because usually they've been caught out before they get a load of their bombs off. So having them a bit more capable in melee, I think makes up for that nicely. So the hand cannons, they're already more expensive, more men on Ultra, less damage but more AP, so they could be doing more AP damage. So the hand cannons, that might actually be enough to make them an armor-piercing unit, which is interesting. So it'll be like handguns but shorter range, and because it's sort of shotguns, they fire in all different directions. Most of the projectiles miss, generally, but some will hit. So it's an interesting one. They're an interesting unit in that regard, because I have a suspicion that they might actually be a lot better at shooting big things. If you shoot a mammoth, you're never going to miss. All the shots are going to hit, and all the armor piercing is going to register, which I think is really good. So I think these guys might be actually better used as sort of flak, like flak guns to fire up at dragons and things, nice big targets. So it'll be interesting to see how these guys pan out. But the extra cost, I'm not sure is warranted, because yeah, you want them to be better, but that's because no one brings them because they're not very good right now. So, make them better, yeah, but making them better and making them cost more seems like an odd one. So, I don't know, it's maybe just to stagger the prices of all the different gunnery mobs a little bit more, because they were all fairly similar. So we'll see. Animated Hulks now have plus 25 armor. So that's great, because they just didn't have enough armor. They would always just melt under pressure. They get killed by very cheap spearmen. They never really did the work. It was always better to spend a little bit extra and get Rotting Prometheans or Mournguls or something like that. They just didn't really have enough going for them. So extra melee defense and extra leadership. It means they're not going to crumble as quickly, which means they're not going to die as quickly. They're not going to take damage as quickly with the extra armor, and they can shrug off more hits with the melee defense. I think this makes them... This potentially actually makes them viable, because they're not that expensive units. But they just never really paid for themselves. You're always better off with just more zombies, usually. They'd be a better roadblock and could get more damage in, So yeah, animated hulks are a bit of a weird one. But yeah, this could help. This could really help. So I'm really happy about this one. So, Gallows Giant. Projectiles no longer expire before reaching max range. I don't really know what that means. I guess that, those big old... Because that's the Gallows Giants. That's the necrophects with the flamethrower. So I'm assuming a load of the flames stopped being an attack before they reached the thing they were fighting. Shooting at, which sucks. They never seem to do enough damage, and that could be why. So maybe that flamethrower is actually going to start, just scorching some units. So it'll be interesting to test him out, because really cool model. Really cool model, and really interesting to have this sort of short-range necrofex, just stomping through lines, setting everything on fire. But it was never that great in practice, so this might help that. This might help. Shade Wraith Gunners are cheaper, which I think is kind of crazy. For me, I find them very reliable anyway, so the fact they're a lot cheaper is pretty crazy to me. That seems unusual, so we'll have to see how that affects things. But I've got a feeling they'll just be an instant pick now. Deathstreak Terrorgeist. So, slightly better entity height. Oh, okay. And now they're 77% wider? Okay, so I guess before they were just had a very tiny footprint, so there weren't many enemy models blocking them in. Whenever they tried to escape, it wasn't representative of how big they actually are. So I guess that footprint is bigger now, which means that more things could be in their way, so there's more mass in front of them. So that, I think, makes a lot of sense, because, you know, they're giant things that should be flying around. For them to just be able to walk through, you know, hundreds of guys with spears, it seems a bit odd. So that makes a lot of sense, and I think that's kind of good, because Terrorgeist could just cycle charge things to oblivion with almost no problems at all. So I like that change. That, I think, is going to be very good. Luther Harkon, obviously same thing as Deathstreak Terrorgeist, and cool. Okay, he was previously the dragon-size entity. That's strange. Okay. So does that mean that it was harder for Harkon to get out of a fight than the Deathstreak Terrorgeist was originally? That could have been the case. I never noticed. Harkon, he's removed. They've removed all hands. They're supposed to say ahoy, I think. All hands ahoy. So no all hands ahoy in multiplayer battles anymore. I think that was the damage buff aura. I think that was, if I'm remembering correctly. So he doesn't have that anymore. Aranessa no longer has Hornswoggle, which means she's completely pointless. There's no point bringing her. I mean, everyone had Hornswoggle, so she didn't have that going for her before, but now that she doesn't, that's a serious debuff. She's shite. She's terrible. Don't ever bother bringing her. She has nothing going for her. That net doesn't last long enough for her to be able to catch anything she's netted, and because, yeah, her animation was broken before, and she did too much damage, now she doesn't do enough. She's rubbish. Forget Aranessa. I'll miss her, but she's useless. And now she doesn't even have Hornswoggle, which was just a great staple of, you know, of their lords. Speaking of that, the fleet admirals now all have lost Hornswoggle as well, which again is strange. I find that unusual. It doesn't say they have Taunt instead. I feel like they should have at least Taunt if they're going to lose Hornswoggle. But then they are very cheap. You know, they are a very cheap unit, so it means you can go very wide, bring a lot of guns. So it's a toss-up. Anyway, Salostro Diapha. So she has, on the Rotting Leviathan, she has a siege attacker. Fair enough. So again, not really appropriate for most multiplayer. So, vampire counts. Terrorgeist, same thing as before. Same with the other Terrorgeist. So they're not able to cycle charge things to death now. It'll be easier to catch, which I think is great. That is a change that needed to happen, because if you're on the ball, you could keep them basically alive forever. They just take no damage, you know, and if they did take a bit, you could heal them up anyway. So it's always a nightmare. You'd have to catch them out really, really successfully to ever make a dent in them. You know, you'd have to get surrounded by like dragon ogres or something, you know, something with high mass that can just keep them pinned down and do a lot of damage. It was the only way. Or just keep nipping at their heels with cavalry. It was very difficult, especially with the amount of fodder the vampire counts have. They could just run through their own lines and escape, you know, every time. It was a bit rubbish. Well, it wasn't rubbish, it was too good. So, Vampire Dragon Vampire Lord, sorry, the Blood Dragon Vampire Lord, removed Undeath Resurgent ability in multiplayer. So that's the one that gives melee defense buffs and leadership, I think, nearby. So he's not going to be as much of a support lord because he's an absolute killing machine. So that's perfect. I think that's great. Now he can focus on killing rather than killing and supporting, because that was a bit much. So that's a nice change, I think. He was a bit overpowered. And also, he's going to have slightly less armor and cost a bit more, slightly less armor, cost a bit more, slightly less armor, cost a bit more, and lower melee defense and cost a bit more. So I think that's all good. Yeah, I think he was a little bit too overpowered before. He just, you know, a little bit of tuning here, just to make him a bit more in line for his cost. I think that works well. Red Duke, slightly more expensive across the board, plus 100 on everything. But that's the cost of Frenzy. He has Frenzy now, which I think is very suitable for him. I think it really fits. So the more he's in combat, the more damage he's going to do, which I really like. So yeah, Frenzy, just across the board. Oh, and also all Hellsteeds have been given plus 10 armor across the board. So every time you see Hellsteed, plus 10 armor. Yeah, they've done that across the board. Zombie Dragon, though, slightly lower melee defense. So yeah, kind of in line with the other Zombie Dragon there, with the Blood Dragon Vampire Lord. So the Vampire of Shadows, Hellsteed now has a bit more armor. All the vampires, in fact, have... interesting. All the vampires have extra armor. The Lamian Vampire Lord has a bit more armor than Hellsteed. Yep. And dragons have Siege Attacker. Dragon has Siege Attacker. Yeah, it's a lot of the same things, just apply to a lot of stuff. The White King, extra armor. Kind of cool. So, Skeletal Steed, a bit of extra armor, which is nice. But Hellsteed's, again, more armor. Yeah, so that's only like 2 changes, but, you know, it's all good. So, the Wood Elves. Treeman, hit reactions, ignore chance. So, again, they're just not going to flail their arms, well, branches, I guess. They're not going to flail their branches around going, oh no, I've been hit by the spearman, so much. They're just going to get, you know, down and dirty, start crushing stuff more often without getting interrupted, which I think is really good. I think that's very good, because the treemen rarely got enough value. They just get hit so often, you know, because there'd be like 50 guys around them, stabbing at them. They'd get interrupted too often, so they got very little killing done. Sure, they were a nightmare to kill, but they wouldn't really do much other than not die, and sometimes that just felt a bit rubbish. So, yeah, you're better off with just tree kin that don't die, and between them can actually get a bit of damage in. Usually more than a treeman, which is odd, because treeman costs 3 times as much, and it's gigantic, and you'd think he'd kill something. So I think that'll help. Orion has extra melee defense. Orion, I think, only had 27 melee defense. He had very low melee defense. So a bit extra, he's going to be a bit more survivable, which I think is good, because usually you've got to finish him with something very heavy hitting anyway, because of the Cloak of Isha. So that extra melee defense, it's still not going to protect him from, you know, things like, I don't know, Krokgar on Grimlock. But it will help him from sort of losing his initial health to just cheap spearmen and things like that, which I think is good. I think that's a nice change. Wildwood Rangers and the Regiment Round, +4 leadership. I don't think that's going to go any way to remedying them. I think they're still going to suck. Yeah, that's right, I said it. They're too flimsy. Same problem with the Censer Bearers, same problem with the Crimson Killers. Oh, the Crimson Killers aren't actually as flimsy, but anyway, they're just too good a target. They do too much when they're in melee, so you just wipe them out. But Wildwood Rangers, you can usually just throw cheap swordsmen and things at them, and because they have such little armor, they just take damage from all sources. So you can just throw something rubbish at them and they're never going to get value. So the extra leadership I don't think is really going to make much of a difference, because they have huge leadership anyway. So I don't think that's their problem. But yeah, we'll see if that makes a difference, but I strongly doubt it. So, abilities now. The Helm of Discord. Helm of Discord is basically like an AoE sort of, well, not quite enfeebling foe, just melee defense, I believe. But his big aura of melee defense debuffing. And now, slightly less range. I think its range was something like 55, so I think it's like 45 now. But it's quite big. So, I think fair enough. It was a big chunk of the army you would get debuffed with that. And it's not supposed to be, you know, a sort of game-changing item. It's just supposed to be a nifty ability you can use every now and then. So, yeah, I think lower effect range suits it. Dwarfs. Red Ruin, which is Ungrim's. That's the one that I think lowers his melee defense, but gives him a ton of extra buffs. I think that's that one. Now you can use it unlimited times, but the duration has been lowered a bit. It's a little bit more expensive in multiplayer, and it recharges in melee, which is interesting. I like the idea of him recharging things in melee. That's kind of how it should be, right? You know, he gets on a roll, gets to proc his abilities, has to rest for a bit, still swinging axes, of course, and then he goes for another sort of sprint. I like that. Axe of Dargo, same thing. So it lasts less time. Ability recharge has been crazily lowered, minus 90 seconds, but it'll recharge in melee only. But that's perfect, because you're just going to throw him into melee and have him just wail on things. So both of these, you know, replenishing in melee, I think it's very good. The Master Rune of Slowness, here we go. So this is now on the Thane, not the Master Engineer, but now it doesn't affect charge bonus. It used to debuff charge bonuses for nearby things. It doesn't do that anymore. But now it just changes movement speed, which I think this is a higher value. I think it was something like 12% before. It was lower, so this is a higher movement speed debuff now, which is interesting. Kind of interesting. It's not a huge amount, but enough to make a difference. You know, it could help some dwarfs actually escape an unfavourable engagement, or help some slayers get onto some cavalry a little easier. So I like that. Greenskin, Spider Banner. So that's a little bit more expensive, and it's had an added 30-meter effect range, which I think makes it quite a big range. And the Spider Banner is what Azag has now, so be interesting to see how that works. I'm looking forward to seeing how that's going to go down. Get on with it for Azag. Remove the charge bonus effect. I think it buffed charge bonus. Yeah, so buff charge bonus for nearby guys. Instead, it's going to add leadership, which I really like, because that really suits Azag, because Azag wasn't about charging, right? The thing is, he had the crown of sorcery. Was the helm of sorcery? No, the crown of sorcery. Yeah, it was Nagash's hat, right? We'll call it that. He had Nagash's hat, and Nagash was in there whispering to him. And so Azag was a marvel of sort of orc intelligence. He actually used strategy in combat. So the idea of his, army having better leadership because of, him being around, that makes a lot of sense. He can actually tell people where to go and do stuff. I know that's not quite how it translates in this game, but it fits. I think it's a nice fit thematically. That's lore-friendly. I like that. I like that a lot. Also, Gitsnik for Grimgore. Less ability duration, but way lower ability recharge. And once again, charges in melee. So I think that makes sense a lot. I mean, you're going to have Grimgore in melee the whole time anyway, so it just means he's going to be able to use Gitsnik a lot more often. Because you want him in melee, because he's stocky, can put up a fight, and he can keep recharging the War while he's in melee. So that's great. It just means he's going to get Gitsnik used a lot more. And with Gitsnik procced, he is a murdering machine. So now he might be more viable again. This might be another move in the right direction to make Grimgore a viable character. So that's really cool to see. Also, the Wood Elves, Horn of the Wild Hunt for Orion. So this is another buff for Orion. It lasts a little bit longer. It doesn't alter the speed at all. Right, so it did have a speed bonus. It's something like 15% or something, like map-wide. But now, they've buffed the charge bonus a heck of a lot. I mean, that is crazy. So like plus 36 to plus 54. If you've got an army with a load of Wild Riders, that's going to put the Wild Riders charge bonus like above 100. It's crazy. So yeah, this is pretty great. This is really cool. I like this change. I like this change a lot. So this charge bonus is for everybody too. It's a map-wide effect. So I like that. And no change to the cost. It's just a nice buff. So I think Orion will be more viable, though I've been enjoying using Orion anyway. But I guess he is a little pricey, maybe, for what he is, but I don't know. I think he's pretty great. So I'm happy with the changes, regardless. Also, some spells have changed a bit. So Denizens of the Deep, that's the rotting Promethean summon. That takes another 4 seconds to recharge. Doesn't seem like that makes a big difference. So I'm a bit baffled as to why that is. 4 seconds? It's nothing, so that seems odd. But anyway, that's happened. Drowned Dead, though, this I think will make a big difference. So Drowned Dead is the raised dead for the Vampire Coast. So that's the one that gets the deck hands rather than just standard zombies. But it replaces that spell for Lore of Vampires. So it's going to cost a little bit more because they are better than zombies, so they should be more expensive to cast. But also the upgraded version actually gave them guns, which is crazy and super useful. You just put that behind an enemy line, they turn around and can shoot, into the backs of shielded units, so the shields don't help them. It's really good. That was huge, and the amount of leadership penalties that would do. It's just great to be able to keep summoning, zombies with guns behind the enemy lines. So yeah, being a little bit more expensive, I think is worthwhile. It was a very powerful tactic. Also, Invocation of Heck. -1 seconds for both the normal and upgraded. So this, I think, is a debuff. And I'll tell you why. Why I'm unsure. Because it depends if the healing for the spell is a set amount that happens over a certain amount of time, or if it's a certain amount of healing per second. You know what I mean? So say it does like 500 healing regardless of how long it lasts. This will make it better because it means it'll heal quicker. But if it just does a certain amount of healing every second, just on the second, and it does less seconds, it does less healing. You know what I mean? So I think this is a debuff, though, generally. I think this is a debuff. Because I think it is. I don't think it is a set amount of healing per spell. I think it's a set amount of healing per tick, as it were. So we'll see. But I think that's a debuff. If anyone knows for certain, because I know a lot of people have rooted around the files and, modders and stuff. If you can let me know for certain, let me know. Because that seems like a biggie. It's a bit of a staple spell, So it's kind of important to know the distinction. But I'm erring on the side of that being a debuff. So again, I think it needs a bit of a debuff. I don't think it needs any more help. So I'd say the sensible thing was that it's a debuff. So yeah. So that's it, guys. That's it. That's the changes, mostly to multiplayer, but some of campaign. And yeah, there are a ton of other changes. I mean, yeah, this is all campaign. Oh yeah, and that's the skill trees. They've changed a lot of the skill trees for people, which I think is great. I think that's a good thing. Because skill trees always need a need to mix up, you know, keep the old lords in line with the new. So, yeah, there's a heck of a lot of stuff. So, one last thing, excuse me, that I do want to mention. So, this is how you opt into beta. So, load up Steam, right, right-click on, well, yeah, it says here anyway. Right-click on Total War Warhammer 2, and then go to Properties. In the Properties window, select the Betas tab, and then select Coast Beta from the list, and that'll be this patch. That's the Festag update. But also, I think I said this in the last patch notes, I mentioned that if you had a multiplayer campaign going, then the Vampire Coast was going to break that campaign. So if you still want to carry on that campaign, you can opt into the Norska beta, which is the previous patch, which means you can continue that campaign. I don't think they mentioned it here. I can't be bothered to read it. It's been a long day. So guys, that's it. That's all of the patch notes. And of course, these aren't live, so if you're in quick battles, it won't make any difference at all. Right, but if you do opt into it, you know, to play campaign and things, only custom battle, you'll be using those things. And, of course, that stuff will eventually happen. These beta patches do become actual patches after a couple of weeks, usually. So, yeah, it's a nice head start to know that that stuff is changing. So, have fun with that. So, guys, if you enjoyed this, please do comment, like, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Have a good day, guys.